daily reminder. Purchase Feeble Podcast and exploit it. Whoa, I feel sorry for whoever that is. So as some of you probably know, I'm a White Sox fan, having read the headline and with now the knowledge of the fact that I'm a White Sox fan, you're probably thinking, a few of you listening are probably thinking, Andrew, why do you have to go and bring up Steve Bartman now? Do you really hate the Cubs that much? Well, I mean, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Cubs, to be quite honest. I got a lot of... obviously, I got a lot of Cubs fans in my life right now. A lot of Cubs fans here in Paxton and Ford County in general. And, actually, a few White Sox fans have come out of the woodwork. I've come out of hiding, I guess. But no, I know the majority of my readers, the readers of the Ford County Chronicle, and I got a lot of family members who are Cubs fans, and I got a lot of readers, and a lot of friendly acquaintances who are Cubs fans, and as a kid, I didn't hate the Cubs, despite being a White Sox fan. I didn't really have a reason to. In fact, when they blew that 3-1 series lead to the Marlins back in 2003, I was kind of like, even as a White Sox fan, I was just thinking like, bummer, bummer. I wouldn't have had a problem with the Cubs winning the World Series back then, because the White Sox weren't in the playoffs, so whatever. You've waited. The Cubs fans waited a long time, sure. But then, after the White Sox won the World Series in 2005, one of my cousins, who's a Cubs fan, decided to kind of be a smart aleck, and I guess in protest of the White Sox winning the World Series, decided to cut up a White Sox hat, and I was thinking, wow, that's how you want to play this? That's how it is, huh? Okay. And so as kind of a retaliation, I placed a white sock on the backside of my pants, and I was leaving one of the beer 30 parties that we used to always have on Friday night, and I pulled up my shirt to show the sock, and I told my cousin to kiss my ass, and then ran out. Not exactly the proudest moment. Honestly, what I wish I would have said then was, and I kind of want to smack my 19-year-old self for not thinking of this himself, but what I wish I would have said to my cousin was, I was trying to catch a Cubs hat myself so I could cut one, but Steve Bartman blocked it away from me, and then I would have had to run out. I probably would have been banned from those parts for life for that. So yeah, kind of a love-hate relationship with Cubs. Plus, I remember a whole bunch of Cubs fans saying every time I wore a Sox cap or Sox shirt, and saying, "You need a Cubs hat," and I'm like, sure, Then I'll buy some gasoline and a box of matches, and it'll keep me warm for an hour in the winter. Yeah, but in all seriousness, I've been in Wrigley Field recently. It's it was a nice place. It was a nice place to be on a summer day. And yeah, yeah, yeah. It was nice. So yeah, love hate. So I guess this bringing up Steve Bartman. I think the reason why I'm bringing it up is just so I can make up for that lost opportunity to get back with my cousin back 21 years ago. No, actually, it was just because after that four part series where I explored a alternate universe where a touchdown catch by an Arizona Cardinal didn't happen, led to Taylor Swift not marrying, not meeting, or marrying, let him alone not marrying Travis Kelsey. And and I linked that four-part episode to the description if you want to check that out. But after doing that, after doing all that, I guess I thought to myself, what other alternate universes can I explore? And hence, and yeah, and it's the same. Yeah, it's from the same year in which that catch by Nate Poole happened. So yeah, it just kind of seemed perfect to me. And I thought about it a little bit further, and I thought, I don't know. I'm not so sure that the Steve Bartman thing would create an alternate universe. When I did my previous alternate universe, I picked a scenario in which the Vikings were pretty much all but assured to clinch the NFC North. If they recover that onside kick, they've got the ball, and Arizona's got one timeout remaining, and best case scenario for the Cardinals at that point would have been that they would have had the ball at their own. Let's say the punter. Let's say the punter on fourth down after a 3-and-out gets the ball and punts the ball in the end zone. So the the Cardinals have about 15 or 20 seconds to move the ball from their own 20-yard line to the end zone. They have about 15 to 20 seconds to go 80 yards. Yeah, that would take quite the miracle. If that happened, that would go down in NFL history. That would really go down in NFL history. Much more than the Nate Poole thing did. But I would say it was not likely. Whereas the Steve Bartman thing, did that really alter the course of history as we know it? I'm not so sure. I guess I'll kind of sidetrack from here. I don't know. I didn't know a good way to segue into this, but the Paxton Swedes and the Royal Giants are going to be faked in a couple days from now. It's 10:25 a.m. on Thursday, August 2nd, 2026. Just in case there's anybody listening to this podcast a little while further down the road. But 2 days from now, on August 8th, starting on August 8th, the Paxton Swedes and the Royal Giants are going to face each other. In a best of three championship series in the Eastern Illinois Baseball League. For those who don't know, it's an amateur baseball league in East Central Illinois. Currently a 5-team league. There's the Giants, the Swedes, the Buckley Dutch Masters, and for now the White Heath Warriors and Arcola High Power. But anyway, when that series concludes on Sunday, August 9th, with either Game 2 or Game 3, when that concludes, that will be the end of my 14th year of covering EI League games as a sports journalist in Paxton. So yeah, and in those 14 years, I've learned that there are only three certainties in life: death, taxes, and umpires disagreeing with fans and teams about what a ball on the strike is. If I had 50 cents, which by the way is the amount of money that retrieving a foul ball at Shivey Field in Buckley can get you. Why is that relevant? I'll get to that. But yeah, if I had 50 cents for every time for every time a fan argued a ball or a strike call, that tip jar that I've been bringing to the games lately would actually be sort of a swear jar, or if you're a fan of the show New Girl, an equivalent to the douchebag jar. Uh, Basically, yeah, and that money would go to support your local media. Yeah. Basically, anytime you argue against a ball and a strike, you put 50 cents into the jar. Yeah, that's an idea, in case anybody in case anybody wants to try to ease the fans' criticism of referee. Anytime somebody criticizes a referee's call, or criticizes a player or whatever, a play call or whatever, they have to put 50 cents into the sportsmanship jar. That's what I'll call it, the sportsmanship jar. Yeah. But yeah, I can't. There've been plenty of times, after arguing a ball or strike, when a batter would either draw a walk or get a base hit after getting a ball call that the fans don't agree with, or they would argue that. Or if a player got a strike call that they didn't agree with, and he strikes out, either strikes out or he grounds out or flies out. There's a lot of ways to get out in a baseball game. But after that, there'd be plenty of times where a fan would yell to the umpires, "That's on you!" And yeah, so. What I mean to say, and the reason why I bring that up is because in relationship to Steve Bartman, I can understand a fan's perspective on momentum, on how a simple thing like either interfering with foul ball or an umpire incorrectly calling a ball or strike can. Yeah, it can have it can lead to a very big impact on a game. Heck, I mean there've been all sorts of things that people have argued that had an impact on a game. Baseball, more than any other sport, is a sport where curses apparently exist. Or used to exist, before they were broken. The Cubs had their infamous Billy Goat curse, and the Boston Red Sox had the curse of the Bambino, and so, but they were both broken, so it's all good, I guess. But any manager worth his salt is after an unfortunate event such as the Bartman thing or missed call ball strike is going to tell a batter, hey, it's either batter going to tell either a batter or a pitcher, hey, got to battle now, got to battle. Just shake it off, shake it off. Yeah. Yeah, but to the fans' credit and to EI League fans' credit, the most threatening thing I've ever heard. I've never heard anybody threaten to kill an umpire or kill a player or whatever. The most threatening thing I've ever heard a fan say to an umpire is, "Well, you don't get any free beer now." Yeah, yeah, that's all. But also, I should probably point out that the most that the teams with the bigger fan bases in the EI League, the Giants, the Swedes, and the Dutch Masters, they've all won an EI League title. They've all won an EI League tournament title in this decade. Each and every one of them is, Royals won one, Paxton's won one, and Buckley's won four. But like I said, either the Swedes or the Giants are gonna get a second one for this decade. So, yeah, no, I'm done, I guess. And whereas in 2003 the Cubs had actually gone about 90 had at that point in time gone about 95 years without winning a World Series. So yeah, I kind of get the anger of a Cubs fan, of a Cubs fan thinking that it's a Cubs fan. It's a Cubs fan who thinks that they're cursed by a billy goat, and thinks they're cursed by a billy goat, and I'm sure there are a few fans that had a few drinks, few beers. Obviously baseball fans are pretty notorious for it, and obviously as a Sox fan, I know I can't really talk shit about other fans being drunk because there's been studies showing that we drink as much, they drink more beer at a ballpark than any other team in the league. So, and as well as being a White Sox fan, I'm also a Bears fan. So, and I probably said things that said things about Cody Parkey that are a little, after the double doink. There you go again, bringing up bad memories. But yeah, I probably after that double doink, I probably said some things about Cody Parkey. I do remember. I don't remember a whole lot about after the game. I was so drunk at that night that I don't even remember how I got home. But I do remember. I do remember at one point them asked a couple of other people at the bar asking me if I thought that Robbie Gould could have hit that kick, and I probably said something along the lines of, "You fucking right, he would have," or something like that. Um, but that being said, all that being said, Cubs fans, the fans and the media, I'm not gonna go on any sort of high horse and say that the media caused Steve Bartman to be treated and harassed and all that. Obviously, I'm bringing up the Steve Bartman thing, so obviously I might be a hypocrite if I tried to get on some kind of high horse, but yeah, the media didn't do Bartman too many favors at that time. putting showing his face and finding out where he lives and stuff. That was not the media's finest hour. That's for sure. But yeah, like I say, in the EI League, the most threatening thing they ever say to an umpire is that they don't get free beer. That that whereas I think I just watched I've seen Catching Hell a few times, that 30 for 30 documentary, and apparently Comcast Sportsnet back in the day, I watched this documentary recently on YouTube, a documentary called Five Outs, and that was the one that talked about Bartman. I think that was produced just a few years before the Cubs won the World Series. I think in the end they talked about how Theo Epstein could probably get the Cubs that long-awaited World Series win. Anyway, they talked about David Kaplan talked about how there was a fan there was somebody called in to his what I guess at the time he worked for WGN Radio, and he talked and told David Kaplan, don't worry, that guy would be dead by midnight. That guy referring to Steve Bartman, of course. And I guess David Kaplan had to be kind of a kind of a therapist for the Cubs, for all the Cubs fans calling in for the next, I don't know, week or so, month, I don't know how long, but yeah. But I think both Catching Hell and Five Outs, they both have pretty much pointed out that there are just so many other factors as to why the Cubs lost that series to the Marlins, and I think, and obviously in 2016, the Cubs actually gave Steve Bartman a World Series ring after the Cubs won the World Series, and well. Say what you want. Say what you want about how the Cubs fans treated Steve Bartman, but if he hadn't have interfered, he wouldn't have gotten the World Series ring. I don't think that the Cubs. I mean, if the Cubs did manage to win it all in 2003, I don't think Steve Bartman would have gotten the ring, but yeah, maybe I'm sure he'd probably trade that ring for 13 years apiece. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't talked to Steve Bartman. I don't know if I'll ever be able to talk to Steve Bartman. I don't know what's in his head, but yeah. But I think over the course of the past 13 years, I think there's probably a majority of Cub fans that have said, you know what, I'm not gonna bash Steve Bartman anymore. I'm good. They treated him. Yeah, again, like I said, they treated him like shit. He had to get leave of absence from work because he had to hide out in his home in Northbrook, and he's and give him credit. He could have cashed in on his fame and stuff, but he didn't. He never did that. He's pretty much just been living a low-key private life. I think a lot of the Cubs fans have, lightened up on Steve Bartman. Especially after the 2016 World Series. After winning the 2016 World Series, I mean, water on the bridge, right? If you still think, I just gotta say, if you're one of those few people who still think Bartman should have been thrown in prison for life without parole, or a pardon from Governor Rod Blagojevich, Uh, yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah, yeah. Remember when Mr. Blagojevich said, "If that guy ever commits a crime, he'll never get a pardon from this governor." Quite ironic, considering what would happen to him in a few years, and considering that he would get a pardon from, of all people, Donald Trump. But I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, if you still think Bartman deserves to be harassed, or just think he deserves death or whatever, I got 4 words for you: get a life, dude. Seriously, just get a life, man. If I'm, if that Bartman deal happened, 2 years after it did, if that happened, if that happened during the first few years of YouTube existing, I would probably bet that there'd be some YouTuber who would be like, "Leave Steve Bartman alone! Leave him alone, you bastards! It was not his fault that the Cubs lost. Leave Steve alone! Seriously!" Um, yeah, I mean, I guess the reason why I haven't quite, and I'm not so sure that I'm gonna do what I did with the Nate Poole catch and try to try to try to nullify that from history and alter the timeline as a result. That thing I did. I don't think I'm gonna do that with Steve Bartman because there's just so many what ifs that come with it. Unlike the Vikings covering the onside kick in my alternate timeline, which was, again, like I said, was very likely to lead the Vikings to win the NFC North. Whereas the Bartman catch, the Bartman interference, did it really did it really it did it really decrease the Cubs' probability of winning that badly? I mean, there's a lot of science. I think there was a science. I was watching. Again, I watched another thing on the Steve Bartman thing. The ESPN used to have this show called Top 5 Reasons You Can't Blame, and they did one on Steve Bartman, and during that show they talked. There was like a scientist who did all the win probabilities for the Cubs, and he pointed out that that had Moises Alou made that catch, that the win probability would have increased, yeah, by maybe 3 or 4%, but but if as a result of Bartman interfering with Alou's foul ball catch, their win probability didn't decrease at all. It stayed the same. It's you know if I was a reporter covering it, and I didn't have all these, I bet I didn't have all these cameras trying to find Steve Bartman. I didn't have all these people trying to find Steve Bartman. That would not have that would have made just a blip on my radar. I would just said, well, okay. All it was said in my scorecard was foul. It didn't change the count. It didn't change the pitch count. It didn't change really anything. Um, but yeah, sure. I mean, I guess there are some questions that are still out there. Um, if Bartman doesn't interfere with the catch, well, for one thing, if he doesn't interfere, does another fan do it? Because obviously, all these documentaries have pretty much showed that there were many Cubs fans who were trying to who were trying to get that foul ball, and if it wasn't Steve Bartman, it would have been probably Joe Schmolinski. That's a fake name. I'm not. Um, but and and if nobody interferes, with Moises Alou, does he make the catch? That's that the probability of that is it's not 100%. Far from it. They, he's trying to climb up a wall and trying to locate a ball tonight. It's no guarantee that he's making that catch. All right, but let's say Moises Alou does make the catch. Actually, hold on. Before we even get to the if Alou makes the catch, there's a whole lot of other factors that led to the Cubs losing that game. And in the 5 Out documentary, they pointed out how Dusty Baker had used up Mark Pryor's arm, kind of maybe unnecessarily in Game 2 of that series, which was a blowout win for the Cubs, and yet he pitched 7 innings or so. There were some people in that documentary who pointed out that maybe Dusty should have relieved Pryor earlier in that game for relief, and kind of saved his arm for Game 6. And oh yeah, they grilled Dusty Baker's decision making in that game, and yeah, there's after Castillo got on base, he did Dusty Baker or pitching coach probably should have gone out to Pryor and said, hey, shake it off. Still got 2 outs. Still got the lead. Go out there and do your thing. Probably would have calmed everybody down, and probably would have calmed Alex Gonzalez down instead of him bobbling that ground ball and under the pressure of I gotta try to get the double play. At that point, and I guess at that point, Dusty Baker still is not, pulling Mark Pryor. And that, turned out to be a huge mistake. And, you had a Game 7 at Wrigley Field, and you had Kerry Wood pitching, and I think they said during the 2003 season there was never a stretch in which Cubs lost 2 straight games with Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood pitching. And they did and the Cubs did have a lead in that game, and yet you blew the lead. Yet the bullpen blew that lead. So just like the 2003 Vikings, the Cubs had a bunch of golden opportunities to avoid blowing that 3-1 series lead to the Marlins. But like the Vikings, they blew it. And Steve Bartman is, at most one of many, 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 many reasons for why the Cubs lost. At most, Bartman was a straw that broke the camel's back, but there were many, many, many other straws. Many, many other straws. with that being said, going back to the what if game. Yeah, does Alou make the catch? Say he does. Does Pryor finish the inning and lead the Cubs to a win? You know, like I said, that the probability of that is not 100%. I mean, while it is possible, while it's definitely more likely than unlikely, there's who knows? Maybe Alex Gonzalez. I mean, sure, maybe Alex Gonzalez is doesn't maybe Alex Gonzalez doesn't make the error if he has it in his mind that he only needs one out instead of two, instead of trying to get two outs. Maybe the grounder to Alex Gonzalez ends the inning, and you still have a ninth inning where you got to preserve a 3-0 lead, and I've going back to me covering the EI League just this year alone, I've seen multiple leads of 3 or more runs get blown in the final inning of the game this year. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Marlins could have gotten a ninth inning rally as well. So, let's say the Cubs do end up winning Game 6. Do they beat the Yankees in the World Series? Hard to say. And I guess if I wanted to do a what if on this whole Steve Bartman incident, then there's numerous ways I could have gone with it. I could have had the Cubs win it all, or I could have had the Yankees win it all. And I could have had the Yankees beating the Cubs, and if that happened, do they try to get Alex Rodriguez? And if not, then where does A-Rod go? Does he go to the Red Sox? Does he stay with the Rangers? Where? And whether it is the Cubs or the Yankees win it all, and if the Cubs win it all, do they win it all? Do they win another World Series in 2016? In 2016? Hard to say. But yeah, whether it's the Cubs or the Yankees winning it all, there were two in that following offseason, there are two very key managerial hires that in that following offseason. The White Sox actually hired Ozzie Guillen that year, and the Red Sox hired Terry Francona. If the Marlins get eliminated, Ozzie Guillen was actually Ozzie Guillen was actually the third base coach for the Marlins before he got hired by the White Sox. So, if he has if he's available for interviews a week early in advance, what happens? Does he get hired by, say, the Mets, the Nationals? Maybe the Red Sox? I don't know. Or does he, wait out Jack McKeon, who, obviously was, pretty old at the time, and wait until he retires and to take over as the Marlins head manager, there's a and if Ozzie Guillen's not a World Series assistant manager, do the White Sox instead hire Terry Francona? I mean, after all, Terry Francona did manage the Birmingham Barons back when Michael Jordan decided to play baseball. Oh yeah, speaking of Michael Jordan, yeah, Tom Brenneman on that Five Outs documentary. This is the Tom Brenneman before Nick Castellanos made it a 4-0 ball game. By the way, if you know, you know. Anyway, Tom Brenneman was telling a story about how he ran into Michael Jordan after Game 6, and Michael Jordan was like, "I'm just gonna stay here in Wrigley Field because it's like nuts outside because a lot of Cubs fans are like zombie that kind of walk around like zombies. Yeah. I guess Michael Jordan was kind of spooked by it and wanted to just stay in Wrigley Field through the night. So yeah, it's worth checking out if you're a Cubs fan. The Five Outs documentary is worth checking out. Or if you're a fan of Major League Baseball in general. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Do the White Sox instead of hiring Ozzie Guillen because he's doesn't have the prestige of being a World Series champion? Do they hire Terry Francona instead? And if that happens, do the Red Sox break their curse in 2004? Or do the White Sox win the World Series in 2005? There's very legitimate questions that I could try to explore. I could try to do a deep dive on it. And also, do the Marlins? Do the Marlins? If they don't win the World Series in 2003, then do they relocate to say Nashville or Vegas? Or Vegas? Maybe they relocate to Vegas and to Las. Maybe they relocate to Las Vegas, and the Oakland Athletics and their owner John Fisher now has to try to make things work in Oakland. That's another interesting aspect. These are legitimate questions, and if I wanted to, I could go do a deep dive, similar to the one I just did a week ago. But I had a lot of free time a week ago. Free time that I'm just not gonna have because the fall sports season is coming up, and there is a lot of sports I gotta cover. So I'm not so sure that I want to try to make the time to do that deep dive, to do that what if on the Steve Bartman incident. But I'm open to it. And I will do it under one of the following conditions. One, I'd need to get a sponsor for this podcast. A paid sponsorship for this podcast. I don't think I could do it without any sort of monetary compensation. Or two, maybe that 4-part podcast I did on the Nate Poole catch, maybe that bumps up to either 10 to 15, 10,000 or more views on YouTube, or gets like 20,000 downloads on Apple or Spotify or whatever, or yeah. I'd need to know that it was kind of if it'd be worth it to do the deep dive, is what I'm saying. But in the meantime, like I say, there's a lot to do in this timeline, so I'm just gonna I'll keep it open, but I'm not gonna make any plans to do it. At least not now. With that in mind, like I said, the Swedes and the Giants, they're gonna face each other in the championship series, and if anything interesting happens, I might talk about that in my next episode, or if anything from the University of Illinois football team's camp comes along, or if if uh, or if anything from high school sports comes up. I'll talk about it in the next podcast. But until then, this has been Drew Rosten. Thank you guys for listening. I'll talk to you guys next time.